Thank you very much, Clinton, for the welcome and also for introducing me. I hope you can hear me. If I may just confirm that you can all hear me and see me, we can then go ahead and get started.
Yes, Prof, we can hear you, we can see you.
Okay, very good. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you, depending on where you are tuning in from. Thank you for taking time off your busy schedules to attend this webinar. As you have heard from Clinton, this is the 5th in our webinar series that have been presented by faculty and fellows from different universities in Uganda, but coordinated by AfriChild Center. And we shall hear in the next talk by the executive director and also the video a lot more about AfriChild. So suffice it to say that AfriChild has coordinated the training and also coordinates the webinar series. So without much ado, I would like to invite the executive director of the AfriChild Center, Mr. Timothy Opobo, to give us opening remarks, and then we shall take it from there. Mr. Opobo, please.
Thank you very much, Professor Wawide, and our panelists for the day, Mr. Polycarp Omara and Miss Connie, as we popularly know her, and our participants. I'd like to welcome you to our webinar today. It's an honor to have you join us, and from the AfriChild Center, we look forward to an engaging discussion. We take this as an opportunity for us to share the work that has come through the research that we are doing through our inter-university program. I would like to acknowledge Muni University, who are the lead in the study that we are going to be disseminating today, and also acknowledge Miss Connie from the Ministry of Education, because the topic that we are discussing today is one that is pertinent to the work that we're doing at the AfriChild Center. And I believe there's a lot for each one of us to learn and pick from this discussion. So I wish us fruitful deliberations. And once again, thank you so much for making time to join us this afternoon and morning for those that are in other parts of the world, or even evening. We look forward to a fruitful discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Timothy Opobo, for the opening remarks. And thank you for welcoming both our panelists, but also the webinar participants. I would like at this juncture to request Clinton to share with us the agenda for the day, so that I will lead you through and give you an idea of how we have structured the webinar. Clinton, please, if you can share the agenda. Yes, there we are. So first of all, as we have heard, AfriChild has a series of webinar, or has a webinar series. And these webinar series are an opportunity for us as AfriChild to disseminate research findings arising from the inter-university child-focused training program. AfriChild runs a child-focused training program in 7 universities in Uganda. This is a 2-year program, but includes intensive training in research methods, grants writing, and also provides seed money for the 7 universities to undertake research. And it is from that research which the 7 universities have undertaken that is presented in the webinar series. This being the 5th webinar, it implies that 5 universities have presented, and therefore we shall have 2 more in the series coming up after this one. So that is the purpose of the webinar series. The agenda, as you can see it there, I will not go into great detail, but I just want to highlight that we shall have an inter-university program video, which will tell us in more detail what I've just mentioned about the inter-university training program. We shall then open up with the first presentation, which will be from Mr. Polycarp Omara. And Polycarp is a lecturer at Moon University, which is one of the 7 universities that are participating in the AfriChild training. And the title of his presentation will be Children's Exposure to Violence in Refugee Educational Settings, Mitigating the Effects on Education and Social Well-being in West Nile region of Uganda. Following that, we shall have reflections from an expert in the Ministry of Education and Sports in Uganda. And this is Ms. Connie Alezuyu. She's Coordinator, Education Response Plan, Secretariat for Refugees and Host Communities in the Ministry. We shall then engage in a question and answer session, which we anticipate to be very lively and to bring out experiences of the participants in the topic for today. We'll then close the meeting with just a few closing remarks and also next steps. Now, permit me to very briefly introduce the speakers that we have for today. And the speakers, I will begin with Mr. Polycarp Omara. Polycarp works as a lecturer and the head of the education department at Moon University. His research interests cover a range of topics in education, such as school-community partnership, teachers' competence, educational supervision, quality assurance in higher education, current issues in education, and violence against children in educational settings. He has published his research findings in international peer-reviewed journals and presented them at various international workshops and conferences. He's also involved in 2 ongoing projects: the DUV Exchange Project, which aims to reduce violence against children and is funded by the European Union, Erasmus+, and the Gulu University Teacher Professional Development Project, which is funded by the Commonwealth of Learning. So Polycarp will be the key speaker for this afternoon, and he will share research findings from the study that was done under the AfriChild seed money. After that, we shall invite Ms. Constance Alezuyu. Connie is a seasoned professional with a rich background in education and humanitarian work. She currently serves as the coordinator for the Education Response Plan Secretariat for Refugees and Host Communities in the Ministry of Education and Sports in Uganda, where she provides technical leadership and ensures that the Education Response Plan addresses gender, protection, and equity. She has 13 years of teaching experience at secondary school and university levels, along with 15 years of work in development, post-conflict, and humanitarian contexts. Connie has demonstrated competencies in evidence-based advocacy, reporting, resource mobilization, and programming for basic and post-primary education. Connie holds a bachelor's degree in science, a postgraduate diploma in education, and a master's degree in science from Makerere University. She also holds certificates in crisis-sensitive education planning, disaster resilience leadership, and project planning. Her work has significantly contributed to ensuring the right to education for all children. Connie will share with us her reflections from the Ministry of Education and Sports as an expert in this area. So I want to ask you to join me in welcoming the two speakers that we have this afternoon, Mr. Polycarp Omara and Miss Connie Alezuyu. Please, Polycarp and Connie, you are most welcome. Having introduced the speakers, I just want to mention briefly. Now, I'm sure most of you are very familiar with the house rules on webinars and virtual meetings. What we'll do is we shall give the presenters their time, 15 minutes for the main presenter and 10 minutes for the discussant without interruption. At the end of the first presentation, we shall allow the audience to ask 1 or 2 or 3 questions, mainly clarification questions, and questions just to make sure that everything is going well. We shall then invite the second speaker, and after that, we'll have question and answer session. We have the Q&A facility within Zoom, and we also have the chat room. So please make sure that you send your questions and your discussion points to the Q&A session. We shall also allow a few people to ask questions or make comments. And if you intend to do that, please put up your hand and I will select you and you'll be able to make the comment or ask the question. So those are the house rules. Please, when you are not speaking, mute. And when you are not speaking, turn off the video. Because we are many and there are issues of bandwidth, we are going to restrict our videos to only the presenters. And even for the presenters, we only request you to turn on your video when you are speaking, and when you are not speaking, you don't turn on the videos. Otherwise, I think we are all set for the next item on the agenda. And the item on the agenda is a program video about AfriChild. So thank you very much for listening to me. You are most welcome once more, and over to Secretariat to show the video.
The AfriChild Center exists to generate research that informs policy and practice for the well-being of children.
Established in 2013, the AfriChild Center is focused on children, on the African child. Our vision is to see an Africa where child well-being is realized for sustainable development. Across the continent of Africa, and specifically sub-Saharan Africa, we continue to witness the plight of children across different spheres of life. Child poverty is on a high. Violence against children continues to plague the lives of children. We have very many children that are orphaned, child-hated households, a high school dropout rate with many children out of school or without the ability to access school and health services. Our institution, the AfriChild Center, has a regional outlook with the intention of generating evidence through research to help inform decisions that are made at policy level, but also at practice level, to help improve on the well-being of children. Our philosophy is hinged on the fact that if we want to see socio-economic transformation of Africa, it will happen through investment in children. As an organization, we have mapped out 3 core program areas that define the work that we do. One is research, and so we undertake child-focused research to inform policy and practice. Two is we work to build the capacity of researchers, owing to the fact that we don't have enough researchers, especially child-focused researchers, generating evidence to inform the decisions that we make. But also building the capacity of the policymakers to be able to use evidence generated through research to inform the decisions and the policies they are formulating. If we are able to achieve the visions that we have, Vision 2030, it's imperative that we invest in the well-being of children.
Join us in our mission to transform the lives of children across Africa. Together, we can make a lasting impact. To learn more about the AfriChild Center and how you can support our work, visit our website or follow us on social media.
Thank you very much, Executive Director, Mr. Timothy Opobo, and AfriChild for sharing with us that short video. There's going to be a poll on the video, so please be prepared. You'll get a message directing you to the poll. The other communication I want to make is that although you registered for this webinar, sometimes there's a difference between people who registered and those who attended. So would like to request you to register in the chat, this time the chat, register in the chat, your name, your organization, and your position at that organization, and the country that that organization is in, so that we have that record of people who have attended the webinar. So without much ado, at this juncture, would like to invite Mr. Polycarp Omara. I have introduced Polycarp Omara. He's a lecturer at Moni University, and Polycarp is going to present on behalf of the team from Moni University, which conducted this study under the 2-year AfriChild inter-university training. Polycarp, the floor is yours. Please go ahead with the presentation. You have 15 minutes.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, colleagues. And thank you for joining us in this presentation on the 5th AfriChild webinar. I am Polycarp Omara, going to present on behalf of Muni University. Team members are Professor Morgan and Madam Betty Akwongo, Paul Churu, and Dennis Akwar. The topic is children's exposure to violence in refugee educational settings, being in West Nile, Uganda, and follow as displayed: study objectives, research questions, methodology, research findings,
Polycarp, we have a problem hearing you. Your connection is not very good.
recommendation, and has received a lot of attention. He is supposed to enjoy the rights to the rights. Are you hearing me now?
Yeah, now we
Hello?
can hear, but before you were sort of breaking up.
Thank you. We can move on. because every child is entitled to enjoy the rights to fundamental freedom in every context. And yet, globally, we also receive children that have continued with diverse effects, and yet this is perpetrated by human-induced displacements like wars, which separate children from their parents and therefore expose them to various forms of violence. So in that regard, countries are encouraged to develop national research agenda on violence against children with essential interest to target prevention as postulated by the UN's 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. The problem is we continue to receive reports on violence against children globally, and Uganda is not exceptional. Children are exposed to several forms of violence. Uganda, several attempts are made to end nations, but we have yet registered against children, physically, intellectually, and also on their physical well-being. And yet, little is known about the situation of violence against children, in especially the refugee settlements in West Nile, Uganda. So therefore, this study is set to examine the various forms of violence in refugee educational settings in West Nile, Uganda, to examine the various perpetrators of violence against children in refugee settlements in West Nile, Uganda, and to establish the effects of violence against children in refugee educational settings in West Nile. And finally, it was said to propose the strategies for preventing violence against children in refugee educational settings in West Nile, Uganda.
Mr. Polycarp will request that you kindly turn off your video to save some bandwidth so that we are able to hear you loud and clear. But kindly turn off your video and proceed.
And also, when you need the next slide, ask for the next slide.
Okay. Next. Next slide. Can I share the slide myself? Okay. The project had the following questions. What are the various forms of violence against children in refugee educational settings? And who are the common perpetrators of violence against children in educational settings? What are the effects of violence against children in refugee educational settings? And finally, what strategies can be used for preventing violence against children in refugee educational settings in West Nile? Next. Methodology. The study employed a concurrent parallel mixed method design, employing both qualitative and quantitative methods of data collection or manipulation of data collected. And a study was carried out in selected primary schools in Bidibidi, Rhino Camp, and in Vepi refugee settlements in West Nile region, Uganda. Data were collected using interview, focus group discussion, and document analysis. The study population comprised of head teachers, children below 18 years. We also had key informants, which include education officers and our development partners. The study participants were 419, where 361 responded to the survey, 338 had a focus discussion, and we had 20 key informants. Next. Next. The study had 4 objectives. The first objective was to examine the forms of violence in refugee educational settings in Western Nile. And the study found out that the common forms of violence in refugee settings were sexual violence, physical violence, and emotional violence. And from the interviews and focus group discussion, and also through surveys, it was found out that all the 3 settlements experience violence against children almost equally, with sexual violence ranging up to 34% and 33% physical and emotional violence. To establish the various perpetrators of violence against children, it was found out that the common perpetrators were caregivers, biological parents, strangers, neighbors, other family members, school teachers, and NGO workers. In Mvepi settlement, participants reported other caregivers, biological parents, and strangers as the main perpetrators of violence against children, while strangers were reported in Bidi. Next, it was found out that there was significant difference between reported cases of violence against children in the 3 settlements and across all bio data. Objective 3 was effects of violence against children, and the common effects of violence reported during interviews were that violence results into psychological torture, physical harm, accelerated role transition, where children assume the roles of mothers or fathers prematurely. It also results into school dropout. It also results into risky behaviors like smoking, alcoholism, and other forms of drug abuse. Violence against children also results into death and retarded growth and development of children. Next. Objective 4 was to propose measures to mitigate violence against children, and it was found out that the common measures suggested by the participants were that training on positive parenting would mitigate violence against children, meetings with the children, encouragement of children to go back to school. They also proposed that there should be home-to-home visit by teachers and other caregivers. They also proposed training children on critical life skills like negotiation, communication skills, and being assertive. They also proposed establishment of community-based structures to allow reporting and referral of violence against children as they occur in the community. The study therefore concludes that physical, sexual, and emotional forms of violence in refugee settlements in West Nile are experienced in the same magnitude. However, Rhino Camp settlement experienced the least forms of violence compared to Bidi and Mvepi settlements. The study also concludes that the main perpetrators of violence against children were parents, teachers, strangers, and neighbors. The study therefore recommends that there should be emphasis on mindset change to alter norms that condone especially sexual abuse of young girls in the society. It is also recommended that schools should encourage creation of safe environments for children. There should be enforcement of laws against perpetrators of violence against children. The study also recommends government agencies and development partners to emphasize parenting education through workshops, seminars, radio talk shows, and through print media. The study also recommends strengthening of emergency response services right from the grassroots. And finally, there should be emphasis on life skills education in all schools using a wide school approach. We want to acknowledge individuals and organizations that supported us during the implementation of this project in the Refugee Educational Settlements in West Nile, Uganda. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Polycarp. Thank you for that articulate presentation and for also sticking to time. You have done it in exactly 15 minutes. As promised earlier, I'm going to give an opportunity to 2 to 3 members who may have questions of clarification or questions regarding additional information to make those questions short and 1 question per participant. I need to see if there are any hands. So far, I do not see any hands. And in the Q&A session, I see that we should have started with a prayer. Apologies about that. But otherwise, I do not see any question of clarification or question seeking additional information. So thank you very much, Polycarp. We now give you some time off while we listen to the discussant, Ms. Connie, and then we shall bring you back for the Q&A session. So, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure and honor at this time to invite Ms. Connie Alezuyu to come and provide her reflections and discuss the presentation which you have just heard. Connie is coordinator of Education Response Plan Secretariat for Refugees and Host Communities in the Ministry of Education and Sports. Connie, the floor is yours and you have 10 minutes. Over to you. We have another question online from Dr. Richard Mangui Ayasi. What was unique among refugee children regarding violence against children compared to the host populations or stable populations? Polycarp, do you have an answer for that? What was unique?
Thank you. That question is similar to the one of Nicholas, but the unique thing is children in the refugee settlements, given their backgrounds and the situations they are undergoing, could be experiencing more forms of violence compared to the stable population. However, we are yet to establish when we do a comparative study of violence among children in school, out of school, and also in the host community. Thank you.
Thank you. Another question from Rogers to Mwesige. Where do we find more details about the methodology and results? Polycarp.
Yeah, the details about methodology and results can be found in our publication, which will be shared soon. It's being worked on by African Center. And I think when we share it, when we publish, then more details can be got. But we have those details, except the 15 minutes could not allow us presenting this short time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Polycarp. from Dr. Modest Odamakai. Dear Polycarp, good afternoon. Thank you very much for the presentation. What are the reasons for the variation in violence indices among the 3 refugee settlements in West Nile? What are the reasons for the variation among the 3 indices? Among the 3 settlements?
Yeah, thank you. When we were analyzing the data and when we disseminated the findings in the 3 settlements with the stakeholders, we also wondered why, but the main reason is that these refugee settlements were not created in the same time. Others are older than the other. And I think the older refugee settlements like in Vepi received more support before, and they kind of have stable structures to address forms of violence against children. Thank you.
Thank you. And second question from Nicholas Tumwebaze. What policy actions do you propose going forward? Policy recommendations.
Yeah, we gave some of them in our recommendations, but the key one is that we should strengthen our schools, community-based systems to support children and families to mitigate violence against children, but also we should have stringent measures, especially the laws. The law enforcement should be stringent to curb violence against children. But the children themselves also propose parenting skills that, of course, parents leave them without giving them support. And so they fall prey to the perpetrators of violence against children. So all in all is policies that strengthen the community services, the community systems that can curb violence against children.
Okay. Next from the chat room. Thanks, Doctor, for the wonderful presentation. I request you to share with me or with us your presentation. Africhild, I will be able to share the slides.
Yes, Africhild will do that.
We'll share the slides. Okay. So we have a hand up from Dr. Betty Akwongo. Betty, please go ahead, unmute, and deliver your submission. Secretariat, can you give Betty the mic?
Okay, thank you so much, the moderator, for the opportunity. I'm one of the members of the Muni University team. Polycarp has presented us so well. We want to thank him. Just to supplement on what Polycarp has said on the question of differences in violence in the 3 different refugee settlements, one of them could be the cultural settings of the different people from the different groups of the refugees, and also the ethnic diversity where the different refugees came from. Thank you.
Thank you, Betty. Eunice, your hand is still up. Can you please unmute and make your submission? Eunice, please unmute. Constance, are you ready?
Thank you, Chair, for your patience, and thank you, audience, for your patience. Yes, I am ready.
Please go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Constance Alezio. I am the coordinator for the Education Response Plan Secretariat for Refugees and Host Communities in the Ministry of Education and Sports. I knew that by the time this meeting is happening, I would be moving from one location to another. And Polycarp very, very kindly shared with me the most recent version of his presentation just before the session started. So I will make some comments, and I'll also focus more kind of going forwards, because I know that discussions have already happened and questions have come in. So I will really just start by appreciating this very, very timely study that looked at, that examined the perspectives of children related to the forms, the perpetrators, the effects and preventive strategies for prevention of violence against children in refugee education settings. And this is very timely because I know we've done different kinds of studies, but because this one focused really more listening to the children, what they said, and we may all remember the slide that he shared where children talked about the effects of violence, and the voices are very, very poignant because they say, you know, the children are lonely when they suffer from violence. He also talked about the injury and then the risky behaviors that come up as a result of a coping mechanism to the violence that children suffered. In the presentation, he also shared with us the key forms of violence that children suffer, which relates to the emotional and psychological, but also sexual and physical as well. And he gave us the occurrence, the indicators of the occurrence, and also the key perpetrators. Again, those were caregivers, those were also duty bearers, and those were other people in the community as well, which suggests that very, very strongly that violence is a very, very, against children is still a very, very key issue in the communities, in the refugee settlements. And then the other key issue that I also wanted to mention was related to what can we do, because it is a very, very bad thing. It's happening, and percentages are really high. And actually, if we look at a recent survey that was shared by, that was premised around the INSPIRE model, and it was looking at violence against children in humanitarian setting. This study was carried out with support, I think, from CDC, but it focused at the community level. And in the community level, the statistics that were shared were even much more worrying and much higher, showing the urgent need to be able to curb this vice and then put in place strategies to be able to mitigate, not just mitigate, but also make sure that we're putting in place opportunities for people to respond differently to challenges related to bringing up children, or challenges when one is dealing with children within the school or within the home setting. Then the third emphasis that I also wanted to make, just also related to one of the questions that was asked, because they asked why the violence, the indicators seem to be more favorable in Mvepi than the other two settlements of Bidibidi and Rhino. And I think Madam Betty did speak into that, related particularly to the ethnicities in the communities, because they're different. We may all be aware that for the refugees that we have in the country, even the ones that come from South Sudan, for example, where we have the majority in the three settlements they're coming from different ethnic groupings, and the ones in Mvepi, particularly from Central Equatoria, which is a much broader, ethnic range of actors as well. And then also look at cultural practices which perpetrate violence. Some of these are related to child upbringing, others are related to preventing actions that parents might or caregivers might deem to be harmful, but you find the way they have been brought up is the way they then respond to these children. And as a result, you find that violence is taken as accepted. And actually, if we examined the description and the definition of the violence that has been given, we'll actually acknowledge that what was reported is not all that is happening. So some of it is unseen, and some of it, probably the children or the respondents did not think that is violence and they ignored it. Issues like neglect, for example, child neglect fits into violence against children as well, and even abuse, physical abuse and verbal abuse also fits against that as well. So you find that the incidence and prevalence of violence is very high, and it does warrant response. And we also know that there's been documented strategies that address each and every one of the different sectors that were identified as perpetrators. For example, the INSPIRE model looks at implementation and enforcement of laws. That is now at the legal aspect, to make sure that when people perpetrate violence, the law is in place, but also sometimes that also acts as a deterrent as well. But then the other methods relate to norms and values. And many times, because children are brought up by parents who, looked at the kind of models and the champions or the bringing up systems that they went through. So you'd find some of these behaviors, they're very, very negative. They affect children's well-being and their performance in school. But then it is accepted, especially by the adults who are perpetrating, or by the caregivers who are taking this up. And as a result, when we're thinking of looking at mitigation, for example, if we don't look at these core norms, these values on which societies base their value systems, then you find we may not be able to see lasting changes. And the other aspect that could also be very important is really looking at the environment within the school environment, but also between school and home. When children are, getting to school or getting back to home, you find it's very, very important to be able to control that environment. Again, I keep referring to the voices of the children when they talked about what does it do for us. And one of the comments was about death. They said it causes death because the children are raped. And when we look at the kind of situations and scenarios in the environment that allow this to happen, the environment is a very, very key element, both the physical environment, but then the social environment as well, that either ignores the calls for help, or that ignores any kind of derogatory comments that are made that eventually result in these kinds of violence. And then the other very important aspect to also focus would then relate to very, very definite support, which is parent and caregiver support. Again, the presenter also talked about it when he was talking about how can we mitigate, where the children said, we need visits to the homes, home-to-home visit. But when we try and unpack this a bit more, we're really looking at very, very specific support, starting, of course, from the homes or locations where this is reported, but then also taking it at a community-wide level within the settlements, refugee settlements, to be able to make sure that the parents and the caregivers get the support they need, and that parenting is not assumed, or bringing up children and doing that oversight is not assumed. And related to that, I'm aware that the Ministry of Education and Sports has made a publication, good parenting, how can we have good parenting, but also looking at things like strengthening the roles of senior women teachers and senior men teachers, without assuming that they themselves already know what is good, because we know within school settings, violence is also used sometimes as a punishment or as correction instead of positive discipline. Although there is a, there is a circular that says this shouldn't happen, but from both our experiences, from what we report and from what we see in the media, we know that this is happening as well. And then there are two other aspects as we look at mitigation that we may want to focus on as well, that relates to income and economic strengthening of both homesteads and families as well, and then the responses and the support services that should be able to, that should be able to support the survivors of violence, whether within the school or so. And then I also just wanted to observe that there's still a lot of scope for research. One of the areas, again, the presenter already identified, where we look at the differences. Why does this, why are we seeing the differences within the different refugee communities? But also, I think another very important aspect would be, now that we have some study that has happened within, it hasn't been published yet, but I'm sure, but the validation was already done. This was done by Boabab, but looking at violence against children in humanitarian settings. But then looking at that INSPIRE model, that is a model that is helping communities to be able to put in place some strategies to prevent that. And they track this, and then to be able to see how best how is this happening, and what are the people saying about what are the people saying about in the community, in the humanitarian settings? What are they saying about violence? So I think a key aspect would be to be able to use that study which has already happened, and then to be able to answer some of the questions this is raising as well. And then also, in addition to that, it would also be interesting to be able to see if one can be able to adopt this INSPIRE model and then understand how is the response, and what are other gaps, or what are the other contexts that should be, that should be addressed in adopting it or in using it to be able to ensure a violence-free community. I think I'll conclude by just thanking the presenters and AfriChild and the university community at MONI very, very much for this study. And also we look forward to the next steps. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Connie, for dissecting the study that was conducted by the MONI team and giving us your reflections on what the findings were. Ladies and gentlemen, we have reached that stage in the agenda where we are going to open it up for questions. And I want to start by referring Connie to a question which was asked by Nicholas to Mwebaze. And I want to repeat this question to you. Of course, it was posed to Polycarp, and he gave his answer from a researcher's perspective. But from a policymaker's perspective, what policy actions would you see going forward? What policy implications could you derive from the study which was conducted? Over to you, Connie. While we wait for more hands, please put up your hand if you want to ask a question, or send it in the Q&A chat room. Over to you, Connie.
Thank you for the pertinent question. When we put in place policies, or whether it is guidelines and whether it is policies, you find that is just step one. And I think as a ministry, one of the things that we need to be able to do is, how is the implementation happening? And also, when we have a policy, many times you find that we publish the documents in English, and yet the users on the community speak a variety. If we're looking at the refugee community and even the accepted languages that are used, that are used broadly, you'll find we're talking not less than 5 to 9 or so different languages. So for me, I think in terms of the policy actions, one of the quick ones, if we have the parenting handbook, we have the reporting, tracking, and response to violence against children. We have those tools available. So one of the first things would be to be able to say, can we get these guidelines, and can we make sure that we can be able to mobilize resources to be able to translate them into local languages and make sure it is accessible. It's in the hands of the community members, because we can talk about law enforcement for perpetrators, but when somebody doesn't know, then you find probably if they knew, they would think twice before they would do it. So we think that it is very important for us to be able to follow through because the commitments have been made in policy. We recognize that, and we applaud the government for that. But we also know that there's a second step, which is making sure it is in the hands of the community members in a language that they can understand. When that is done, then we can also begin to be able to look at engagements, whether it is the barazas, also to be able to say do we agree with what we are seeing related to violence? If we don't agree with the actions that are being done, the maltreatment of children, if we don't agree, what does it call from me as a community member, as an opinion leader, so that we take the discussion to the homes, to the communities, to the marketplaces, because that is how we can be able to take the agenda for mitigating violence against children, and it can become an issue that's not just accepted, but we can find agreement that no, we don't want this. So very quickly, I think those are the two critical actions that as policy actors that are on our table. Thank you, and over.
Thank you very much, Connie. We have another question. What was the time period of this research? And I think that question is directed to Polycarp. And then at the same time, this one is from an anonymous attendee. And the question is, I wonder how children are able to differentiate between physical punishment and physical violence. Is it possible that children may mix the two up? Or are we saying there should be no physical punishment at all? I know, Connie, you alluded to the new regulations regarding corporal punishment from the Ministry of Education. You could address some of that, but also Polycarp could also address whether the children were able to differentiate. So let's have Polycarp address the question of time period of the study. And then again, Polycarp, you will address the issue of whether they can differentiate between physical punishment and physical violence. And then, Connie, you can come back with the regulations regarding corporate punishment and whether there should be no physical punishment in schools at all. Over to you, Polycarp.
Thank you, Prof, the moderator, and colleagues. The time frame for this study, the study took 6 months, but we relied on data for the past 3 years to inform our study. And secondly, whether children are able to differentiate between physical punishment and physical violence. A physical punishment that inflicts pain or injury is already violence. And so if it is a punishment, it's already violence. And so we advocate for positive measures of instilling discipline in our children, not beating, not eating, not abusing, as it is in some communities. So physical punishment is a form of physical violence because it inflicts pain and injury in the child. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Polycarp. Connie, can you add to that from the perspective of the Ministry of Education? What are the regulations like?
Thank you. As I respond, thank you for that honesty in expressing the confusion regarding the physical punishment. I mean, the physical punishment that is usually meted out, and then violence. And Polycarp has said it well. I'd also like to say that when we look at the education setting, even at the homes, when we look at bringing up children, we usually want to look at shaping the wheel, not breaking the wheel. That takes engagement. That takes time. And you find that many times why physical punishment is used and it kind of becomes accepted. And because it is common and because it is accepted, it is assumed to be okay. But here we say that something that causes pain shouldn't be, and discomfort and maltreatment of a child is not acceptable. So I must reiterate the fact that in the guidance that ministry provided where they said corporal punishment is not allowed, it didn't just stop there. We had guidance which came up with what are the forms of positive discipline that can be worked on. At a recent meeting earlier this year, I think around April, May this year, we had a meeting with head teachers in the West Nile region of all the secondary schools together with the district inspectors as well. And one of the things where strikes had happened in the school and the kind of violence was unprecedented. So as we engaged with the head teachers, some of them actually even shared and they said, but how can't you beat a child? You have to beat a child to make them listen. This is not, you can't do it otherwise. And then we shared, no, you as a person, you find you also have issues, psychological issues and all that. And sometimes you're reacting in anger and you're not actually being able to look and see, to just reflect on that situation before coming up. So just to conclude this by saying that they're acceptable and they're a very wide range of positive discipline actions that can be done, and this has been published as well. So one of the things we look out is also to see that as actors, duty bearers, and as parents and as different members of the society, you find we are not innocent from violence against children. We actually also, accept it and do it as well. So it needs to start with us. One, want to reflect on what we do, to also reflect and say, do we shape the wheel or do we break the wheel? And we've seen studies where they've done studies and to understand why children do well in certain countries. I think Finland was one of those countries. And the teachers say, when my child comes to school, I want them to be happy. All the teachers, whether it was maths or whichever one, all of them say the first thing I want for the child is they should be happy. And I think that should be an attitude that we develop as well, to see that when children come into a space, we're looking out for their happiness, not condoning wrong behavior, but shaping that will to be able to make sure that they can also be able to know how to be able to address themselves and others. Thank you.
Thank you. We have 3 more questions online. The first one is from Joyce Fekira, and it is, how will the implementation apportion be carried between the refugee child and the hosting community child? How will the implementation apportion be carried? Is this be carried out? Have you understood the question? Presenters, please.
Kindly clarify. Thank you.
Okay, let's ask Joyce Fekira to please clarify the question. Can you put your hand up and request for a mic so that you can clarify the question? Meanwhile, we'll go to the next one, which is from Judy Kamanyi. In your work, did you come across the Ministry of Education and Sports guidelines on the prevention of violence in schools being used? Did you come across the guidelines?
Yeah, thank you. In the refugee settlements, our partners have done great work in supporting the works of the Ministry of Education and Sports. Yeah, and indeed, in some of the schools, we got guidelines, but also our partners have developed, together with the school community, talking compounds that talks about violence against children and how they can be prevented. Yes.
Okay, good. Next, from Richard Mangui Ayasi. I noticed an equal distribution of the different forms of violence. You remember that in the results, there was that equal distribution of the different forms of violence. Do you anticipate any methodological challenges in how the different questions about violence were asked? Were there any methodological challenges? Because it is equal.
Yes, to some extent, yeah, there could be methodological challenges, but also the fact is a child may experience more than one forms of violence. For example, a child who is physically abused may also inflict pain, which is emotional, which is psychological. In our recommendations for further research, we recommended taking a different approach. We took a mixed method design, but we would recommend probably a purely qualitative so that we can get in-depth information from our participants. Thank you.
Thank you. Joyce, please go ahead. Emma, can you please give Joyce a mic? Yeah, unmute and make your submission, Joyce.
Hello.
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 Hello, we can hear you, Joyce. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to clarify my question. I think my question was driven from the focus on this entire research. From experience, most of these projects that are being implemented in the refugee camps give 60% to refugees and 40% goes to the host communities. So I would like to understand on this research, is it entirely focused on the refugee child, or it includes the hosting community child. Reasons being, we are looking at the environment. In one of the mitigation method, it looked at house-to-house visits. Okay, if it is going to look at both the refugee and the hosting community child, what percentage goes greatest to which community? Thank you.
Okay. All right. So Polycarp, please go ahead, and then Connie, you will supplement.
Yes. Thank you. Our study largely focused on refugee children. We didn't have a comparative study of the host communities and the refugee children. Our focus was majorly on refugee children. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much. Natukunda Lois asks, what can be some of the alternatives to physical abuses like caning in schools? Connie, you want to take that one? What are the alternatives to physical abuses?
Thanks. I think there are very, very many creative alternatives. Sometimes it is withholding something, for example, or keeping a child if it's time for play. We said play is very, very important. But if the play time is 30 minutes or 45 minutes or so, keeping them 10 minutes, and sometimes they write commitments, to be able to say, I did ABCD, this is not okay. And then they take time to be able to write that out in 10 or 15 minutes of their time. So they go out to play. We know children love to play, but they will play for less time. And because that's something they really, really like, it will be able to speak to them as well. And then sometimes the other forms would also be being able to see how they can stay on and do a kind deed, and then you give merits for that. I know schools where children actually get rewarded for, when they do something bad, then as a punishment or as a positive discipline, then you require that they should do a kind deed, and then they should be able to they kind of check that number of kind deeds that they have had. And then that goes towards the discipline aspect, and also it allows them to be able to think about that action as well. And the other way one can be able to do it is to be able to have a reflection on that, because sometimes when an action is done, then you find immediately, if we're taking violence, you find it's very immediate. And usually it's either beating or pushing or whatever it is. But if one can be able to engage and say, when you did this, what was the motivation? Because we have found from working within the schools and in the refugee settings that sometimes children are violent, or people, they're experiencing that violence from people who have gone through violence themselves and they actually need help. So just to say that if you're the one observing, that is it. But if you're the one looking for the positive discipline aspects, those are just some of the quick ones. I can share the full repertoire through to AfriChild, who can then be able to give it to you if you give your contacts to AfriChild. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We have a comment from Professor Peter Ubombwa Joshua. Professor Peter was one of the first facilitators in the inter-university training program of AfriChild while he was at Uganda Christian University, and he has now since moved to Pretoria, where he's sending this message. Let me try to read it a bit quickly. Thank you so much for focusing on violence against children at this time. Just to mention, effects of family formation and preservation on the promotion or undermining violence on children. Underlying cultural values that promote violence according to various population groups, including ethnic values expressed among refugees. etc., etc. There is no time to speak at length on this. It is such a vital topic. So he has highlighted a few issues that we need to be aware of, and there is more to that, but not much time. And we are going to move on. I think we can allow the two presenters to make comments on Professor Joshua's comment, but let's first take Betty Akwongo. Betty, you have both a comment and your hand is up. Which one do you want to go with? You want to speak or we read your comment? Okay, so let me read the comment. Dr. Alezuyo, what regulatory framework is in place to overcome violence due to ethnicity diversity among the refugee children, which has most times turned fatal? So that is also related to what Professor Joshua mentioned. So Connie, as you respond to that, please respond to Professor's comment as well. Now, time-wise, we're at 16:21. I was assuming that we are given 1 hour and a half, but when I looked at the timetable, it shows 1 hour. What is it, Clinton? Is it 1 hour and a half or 1 hour?
Is 1 hour.
Oops, so we are beyond by 22. Okay, so Betty, let's have Betty, and then we shall close up. Betty? Okay, so Betty says what regulatory framework is in place. So Connie, can you please address that and then we close up?
Just to quickly say that when refugees come, you find we have peaceful coexistence strategies in place. We have, both for between host communities, but within the refugee settings themselves. And this is usually one of the very, very first structures that are put in place. And then to be able to set up centers where people who have, have been survivors of violence are able to be assessed. Along with trainings, you find that when we have teachers who come into the refugee settings to be able to train, they're actually taken through those provisions, what is in place in terms of the reporting, in terms of the tracking, but also in terms of the follow-up actions as well, complete to the cycle where it gets reported to the legal entities to be able to have the person who perpetrated the violence handled, and whether they are refugee, whether they are host community, whether whatever it is. And then we also have prevention of sexual policy guidelines related to prevention of sexual exploitation and abuse in place as well. So you find usually these the code of conducts actually have this in place. So that is also one of the ways we make sure that the regulatory framework is in place. But over and above that, to make sure that on an annual basis, everybody who does work, whether you are a contractor, wherever you are, together with the lead person that brings you, actually is oriented onto this, and they're also called upon to sign and to commit to make sure that they're not going to perpetrate. We know even when the perpetration happens, for the actors and the service providers, this has happened. And also just to say that what Professor has just mentioned is really what it is, because the way the child or teenage marriages are arranged, or the cultural practices where the marriages are arranged against the children. And even if we look at the incidences of teenage pregnancy that happen, when that you even witness it, the mother has a lot of pain, and when this child comes, she's looking at it as the source of all this pain or the result of all this pain. So the child receives violence as a result of that. So Professor is very spot on when he says that is actually a very big agenda that we should be focusing, both from the research perspective, but also in terms of the implementation and the addressing of these of violence in the communities within refugee settings. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Connie, for responding to those comments and questions. And thank you very much, Polycarp, for responding to the comments and questions. And thank you, both of you, for the presentations which you made to generate such a rich discussion. The discussion was so rich, I was carried away. Then I realized that, this could have been a 1 hour webinar, and I'm so sorry, but please forgive me. The discussion was rich, and I think it was worth it. Allow me to read just one comment, then I hand over to Africhild for closure. The comment is from Mr. Polycarp Omara, and he says, moderator, I want to appreciate staff, students of MUNI, and everyone who has attended this webinar. We are such a great family. Okay, and so that is all from me. It's been a pleasure facilitating or moderating this webinar. I look forward for yet another time when I'll be able to facilitate another seminar with you people, you colleagues in attendance. And so right now, let me hand you over to AfriChild. Clinton, Edie, the floor is yours, please. Over to you.